Caribbean sun sparkled over a massive white cruise liner drifting silently across the sea, but this wasn't a tranquil vacation moment. On board, thousands of passengers huddled in darkness, their dream getaway descending into a waking nightmare. The air was thick, humid, and heavy with the unbearable stench of human waste. Toilets had stopped working, electricity was gone, food was running out, and there was no land in sight. This isn't the premise of a disaster movie. This is what really happened aboard the Carnival Triumph in 2013 in one of the most infamous cruise catastrophes in history, now known to the world as the Poop Cruise. At the time, Carnival was, and still is, one of the largest cruise lines in the world, operating 27 ships and offering budget-friendly vacation options to millions annually. Known for its affordable prices, all-you-can-eat buffets, onboard water parks, and sprawling entertainment options, Carnival had branded itself as the fun-for-everyone line. But, as many learned, that affordability comes with hidden costs, and not just financial ones. The Carnival Triumph, now renamed the Carnival Sunrise, was a seasoned vessel in the Carnival fleet. Originally built in 1999, it was part of the Destiny-class ships and could carry nearly 4,000 people, including 1,100 crew members. With water slides, comedy clubs, Guy Fieri-branded restaurants, and even a VIP chef's table, it was designed to deliver fun on the high seas. But all the deep-fried indulgence in the world couldn't mask the ship's underlying issues. On February 7, 2013, the Triumph set sail from Galveston, Texas, on a 4-day cruise to Mexico. Passengers were excited, the weather was pleasant, it was business as usual, but deep in the bowels of the ship, danger was quietly simmering. That's because only 4 of the 6 onboard generators were functional. Even before the ship departed, crew members had reportedly prepared printed apology letters for passengers in case delays occurred, a sign that problems were expected. The first day was uneventful and relaxing. Passengers docked in Cozumel, enjoyed excursions, and returned for dinner, shows, and drinks. That night, as they drifted off to sleep, alarms suddenly blared. Panic spread quickly, smoke billowed from the aft engine room, and emergency lights flickered on as passengers poured into the corridors. A fire had broken out below deck, triggering the ship's fire suppression system. Thankfully, the blaze was quickly extinguished, but the damage was done. The fire disabled the main engine and knocked out electrical power. Suddenly, the 102,000-ton Carnival Triumph, once a symbol of affordable oceanic luxury, was adrift in the Caribbean, powerless and vulnerable. The engines had failed, the lights flickered and died. With the flip of a circuit, what was supposed to be a carefree vacation had transformed into a maritime survival story. Without power, the ship lost all propulsion, drifting helplessly with the ocean currents. But that was only the beginning. On board, nearly 4,200 people were learning the hard way just how many modern necessities rely on electricity. Air conditioning vanished in the span of minutes, and with it, any hope of respite from the punishing Caribbean sun. The refrigeration systems died too, setting off a silent countdown for the ship's food supply. But perhaps worst of all, worse than the sweltering heat, worse than the slow spoilage of once frozen meat, was the failure of the ship's sewage system. Cruise ships are essentially floating cities. They carry more people than some small towns, and they rely on highly engineered systems to handle everything from freshwater production to waste disposal. Carnival Triumph's plumbing system depended on electric vacuum pumps to move waste through treatment tanks and eventually offload it at sea in designated zones. Without electricity, those systems went silent. Within hours, waste began backing up into toilets, which couldn't flush. Crew members made intercom announcements asking passengers to stop using their toilets, already too late. Human waste began overflowing, seeping into cabins and filling lower deck hallways with an unmistakable stench that grew thicker with each hour. The Triumph's grand corridors, once buzzing with laughter and rum runners, became passageways of sewage and despair. In a desperate measure, red biohazard bags were distributed to passengers. These were now the ship's new toilets. Instructions were simple but humiliating. Do your business, tie it up, and leave it outside your cabin. Passengers, some wearing vacation t-shirts and flip-flops, others in swimsuits, now found themselves dragging soiled plastic bags through hallways slick with urine and sewage. It felt less like a vacation and more like a dystopian fever dream. The heat became unbearable. With no ventilation or AC, lower deck cabins turned into ovens. Temperatures inside reportedly reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius. Passengers began dragging their mattresses and bedding to the upper decks, trying to sleep under the stars to escape the stench and heat below. It looked like a refugee camp in the middle of the ocean, tents made from bed sheets, people sleeping on poolside loungers, others lying on towels beside overflowing trash bins. Carnival scrambled to organize a rescue. The initial plan was to tow the Triumph to Progreso, Mexico, which was relatively nearby. But nature had other plans. Without engines, the vessel drifted aimlessly, carried farther north by powerful Gulf currents. Tugboats dispatched to intercept it had to adjust course. The new destination was Mobile, Alabama. The revised timeline: 5 days, 5 days in hell. As time stretched, food supplies plummeted. With refrigeration dead, dairy products spoiled, meat went bad, and produce wilted. Meals were reduced to whatever could be salvaged. Some passengers were handed raw onions and stale buns. Others reported cucumber and bread sandwiches served after hours of waiting in lines that snaked down stairwells. The lucky ones had hoarded boxes of cereal and bottled water from the first night of chaos. They became the new elite of the floating class divide, trading granola bars like currency. By day 3, the Triumph wasn't just a ship. It was a biohazard zone. Passengers described stepping over slick patches of brown water in hallways and sleeping next to leaking bags of human waste. Reports of vomiting and food poisoning emerged as warm, unrefrigerated food was served out of necessity. With no sanitation and limited medical care, it didn't take long before parts of the ship began to resemble a sick ward. Children cried through the night. Elderly passengers collapsed from dehydration, and others screamed in frustration. Psychologically, the breakdown came quickly. With little communication from the crew, who themselves were exhausted, overwhelmed, and just as trapped, passengers had no idea when they'd be rescued. Tempers flared. Paranoia took hold. Rumors swirled. Fights broke out over food and sleeping space. In one chilling incident, a movie screening set up to lift morale had to be stopped when a man began shouting violently at the screen, pushed past his breaking point by the unbearable heat and stress. When tugboats finally reached the Triumph, it was a moment of collective relief. But it wasn't smooth sailing from there. Rough waters, strong winds, and a snapped tow line delayed the progress. The journey to Mobile, originally expected to take a day or two, stretched on. Meanwhile, the world had started paying attention. News helicopters circled overhead. Cable news ran live updates. It was no longer the Carnival Triumph, it was the Poop Cruise. Aware of the optics, Carnival executives reportedly ordered crew members to clean the decks and drag mattresses and sick passengers back into their cabins, so the ship wouldn't appear to be the biohazard it had become. But the truth couldn't be masked. When the Triumph limped into Mobile's port on February 14th, Valentine's Day no less, it didn't bring love. It brought fury. Passengers disembarked to flashing cameras, crying family members, and the overwhelming smell of human waste. Many were taken straight to hospitals and IV drips. Others went to find showers, real food, or simply the peace of dry, steady land. But most of all, they wanted answers and accountability. Carnival offered every passenger a refund, $500, and, almost comically, a free cruise. For people who had spent 5 days floating in a toilet with no power, this felt like a cruel joke. Many turned to lawyers, lawsuits followed, including a class action representing over 100 passengers. But few succeeded. Most cruise lines, including Carnival, register their ships in countries like the Bahamas to avoid U.S. regulations. The Triumph's fine print made litigation nearly impossible, with clauses limiting liability and enforcing foreign legal jurisdiction. Despite the outcry, Carnival eventually recovered. The Triumph underwent extensive repairs and rebranding. In 2019, it reemerged as the Carnival Sunrise, given a fresh paint job, new amenities, and a new identity. Today, Carnival Corporation is once again one of the dominant forces in cruising, owning Princess Cruises, Seabourn, and Cunard, among others. But for those 4,200 passengers stranded in the Caribbean in 2013, the memories of raw onions, plastic toilet bags, and sewage-slick hallways aren't easily washed away. It was a modern-day odyssey, a vivid reminder that beneath the glamour and buffet lines of the cruise industry, one mechanical failure can turn paradise into floating purgatory. The Poop Cruise wasn't just a PR disaster, it was a real-world example of how quickly luxury can turn into survival when safety systems fail. It highlighted critical flaws in cruise oversight and maintenance, and it reminded everyone once you're at sea, there's nowhere to run. So next time someone says, "Let's book a Carnival cruise," maybe double-check the generator report first.